am Dan Calchico, DanLaw83 on Twitter. Craig Lagan's at Craig Lagans. He'll tell you how to spell it later because it's real hard to spell if you sound it out, apparently. Mine's harder. Calchico. Good luck, folks. Welcome to HIAC Wrestling Podcast. So next week, first of all, let's talk about next week. Next week, Chris Green, I hope, will be joining us next week, because I said that 3 times, to talk about what happened at the Royal Rumble this coming weekend. So we're going to avoid all Royal Rumble discussion until we have our boy back with us. But we are going to discuss Wrestling Historian. A little tidbit here and there about this week in wrestling. But first, we're going to, outside of the realm of professional wrestling for a minute, and we're going to talk about the passing of a goddamn legend. In the world of comedy, movies, writing, in general, wrote books, the passing of the late great Terry Jones. For those who don't know, it's the other Terry, or as I like to call it, the better Terry, quote unquote, of Monty Python, at 77 years old today.
Yes.
77 years old. And I posted on Twitter, and I'll elaborate here. There they are. They're from the special. I'll elaborate here a little bit. It's weird because I got the remastered Blu-ray box set of the entire television series. So anything you saw prior to this release was never complete. There's always bits that were edited out, censors, muted words, bits that were lost to history. This is the whole thing that had been restored to its original state before the censors or the time constraints got their hands on it. And we just got to the season, Series 4, the one season they did without Cleese. And Terry Jones and Palin just come out and shine. Because Eric Idle and Graham Chapman always shined, and Palin had moments of brilliance. And Terry Jones, that's the whole point I'm getting to. Terry Jones is probably the most underrated member of Monty Python. Way underrated, and it's a goddamn crime. Not only was he a brilliant writer, not only was he hilarious, but he just did not care. And what I mean is if you needed somebody to get naked, Terry Jones. If you needed somebody to take a fall or a pratfall or a stunt or get abused, Terry Jones. Later on would go on to he co-directed the Holy Grail, everybody's favorite Python movie, not mine. Everyone's favorite Python movie, Holy Grail. Well, I'm getting to the point, Craig. Warming up here. Holy Grail with Gilliam, Gilliam has become an amazing director. Recent years, not so much, but that's another discussion for another time. But he directed The Life of Brian, my favorite Python movie. I love that movie. It's weird because I was raised on Holy Grail and The Flying Circus, and I didn't see Life of Brian until I was like 23, 24. It came out on DVD finally. And I was like, this is one of the best movies I've ever seen. From start to finish, that's almost perfect. And that was all done under the guise of Mr. Terry Jones. So the guys were like, thank you, you do it. He's like, I'll direct it. Oh, thank God. Fine, you do it. But I don't think he gets enough credit. Just to name a few things, the musical mice on Monty Python. The spam sketch is all him taking the lead on that. Sir Bedivere, the wise, right? I'm drawing a blank now. Sir Bedivere the wise on Holy Grail. The mystery fish, the meaning of fish in The Meaning of Life. Wrote a bunch of books, directed a bunch of movies. The guy was just insane. And like I said, highly underrated. If anybody has access to this television show and the movies, if you haven't seen all of it, do, because, as amazing as everybody else was, Terry Jones is the heart and soul of that group. The literal heart and soul of that group, Craig.
Most definitely. Terry Jones was, and the thing about Monty Python, we talked before we went on the air about our favorite basketball team. We were talking about the best starting five, and Monty Python, the Mighty Python troupe probably the best sketch group of all time because you have such a deep cast.
Yeah.
Because 1 through 5, 1 through 6, there wasn't anyone in that group that wasn't in just MVP funny. You have five of the, I mean, even you take one of them away, and it's still, the greatest show on earth, the greatest, comedy troupe, ever assembled. And the fact that there was so much talent uh, in one group that you could take any of them away, and they could all carry a film, they could all carry an episode, they can all carry a scene. And with Terry Jones, like you said, not just comic actor, but writer, director, performer. Even when he didn't speak, and just opening the show with him playing the organ in the nude was enough because you knew something, and he didn't even have to be in the skit for it to. For he stole the opening just like that, just by looking over his shoulder and playing the organ nude. Um, and so many sketches, so many things we love, we forget that he was in. The spam sketch that had so many great people in it, but you forget he was the one that started the whole. That he was the waitress that was saying spam, adding spam to the menu on everything. Uh, it, Monty Python and the Holy Grail is my favorite Python film ever, and obviously everyone's got their favorite. He directed Life of Brian, the movie that really put Python on the map on a national scale. The one Monty Python when it first came on, and I was a youth. It came on Channel 12, the PBS affiliate here, and it came on at 11 o'clock on a Sunday night, and that was the first time. Yeah, WHYY Channel 12 here in Philadelphia. But that was the first time that Monty Python was seen in the States, was on public television. And that was the first boobs I ever saw, was Monty
Yeah.
Python. Are they allowed to do this? Is that, it's Channel 12. But I said, Dan, it's educational. That's why it's on there.
Oh, sure. That's
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
Channel 12, that's the same network that Sesame Street and the Electric Company. So it's all educational. So if I'm
Sure.
seeing, if I'm seeing a woman's naughty bits, then, or hear the term bouncy bouncy, then I'm learning a lot. So Monty Python opened so many doors, windows, avenues for me, and it's impossible to quantify how many laughs Terry Jones gave me individually or the troupe gave me collectively. When you say Terry Jones, you can't talk about him without talking about the entire group because, like I said, the greatest sketch comedy group ever assembled with 5, 6 undeniably insanely talented people that can do so many things, not just act, not just direct, not just write. I mean, Terry Jones was the better Terry, but the American Terry, as I call him, Terry Gilliam, is the one that that did all the animation and that who directed, co-directed Holy Grail, and then directed Time Bandits and Brazil and so many eye-opening, eye-popping things. Again, with the brain, the imagination that they all had, even taking something as silly as slapping someone in the face with a fish to and they all, and you had to write this down. You understand? All this was written down. I'm going to slap
Yeah.
you. I'm going to walk. There's going to be a ministry of silly walks. And you're reading this, and it's like, okay, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. And or just stopping a sketch midway and say, you know what, this isn't silly. It's not silly enough. So many things. Terry
They were
Jones.
the kings of the segue.
Yeah.
They made it an excuse where if the sketch wasn't going well, or if they purposely or accidentally wrote into a wall, even 30 seconds into the sketch, just stop and have that be the segue. Oh, no, this is all too silly. Get on to the next. Just that's the one thing I forgot about rewatching the series is the unreal timing of the segue. Is like, we're done with this. We're just gonna move on.
I watched this, and I remember I watched this on public television where there was no commercial, so it was just a show. I never knew when the show was over because even when they showed something for series, like, okay, I'm waiting for the joke because Monty Python just gave me 30 minutes of hilarity, even starting off as something serious, turning into something funny, or something. So I never knew when the show was over.
Well, they also did this thing where, and they did it a lot more during that final series. But for those who don't know, in the UK, when I say series, I'm referring to season. They call it series, which every name over there is better than the crappy names we have for it over here. But that's just my opinion. But because they would start an episode and they wouldn't show the title card until 10 minutes in sometime.
10 minutes in, yeah.
Or it would be at the very end, right into the credits. They'd show a title card. Just brilliant. It's just one of the first things my dad taught me when trying to be funny, which maybe I still have to learn some things. Wink, wink. Nudge, nudge. There's a reference I didn't even mean to do. Was you could say the funniest thing, but if it's not timed well, it's going to sound like crap.
Yeah.
Learn your timing. And one of the things they did better than anybody to this day is timing. I still, you talk about timeless. They satirized homophobia, sexism, racism, religion before anybody else did it. No. Like in your face on purpose, making fun of the stupid people in the world. 95% of it has aged very well. There's about 5% of that show where I see blackface. I'm like, ooh. Oh, okay. Or there's an Asian impression where I'm like, oh no. No. In fact, one of the funniest, isn't it episode 1? The one we keep making fun of? It's like episode 1. And you don't understand, I've watched this all my life. And I didn't pick up on it until Kelly started laughing out loud, hysterical about this. Where they're in a room with a bunch of Italian. It's Palin, Jones, and Cleese are Italian mobsters talking about how to finish, and it just trails off to where. And I'm going to say this, and I'm quoting the show, so back off. I'm Italian. I don't care. So be offended for somebody else. Where Graham Chapman walks in as the general, all right, you eye ties. And I'm sitting there just watching, and all of a sudden, Kelly just starts laughing out loud. It took her to say it. Oh, my God. It was the funniest. Oh, that's hilarious. But they made fun of everybody, every minute of it, except for it's about 5% of the show where it's like, is every bit irrelevant today as it was 50 years ago it started. 50 years.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's a sad one. I'm sure you realized it as well, but Palin for a while was keeping us updated on his condition. He had a form of dementia that like my grandmom has it. My other grandmom had it where it attacked the brain, her whole body. Like by the end, she was in a wheelchair. She wasn't communicating. For him, it was, I don't know what it is. I don't know how to explain it other than it was messing with his communication skills. Right. He still was lucid and everything, but he could not communicate where to go in a car. Like he couldn't go for rides anymore because it would drive him crazy. And at first it was laughable, haha, that's pretty funny. With Palin, like he couldn't tell the driver, "You're doing it wrong." No, go the other way. But yes, it's a sad day. He is one of the best best comedian out there. And I'm glad that they did that last show together. They did a run of 10 shows in England. The Blu-ray, not dead yet. One down, 5 to go. Yeah. Which is now, they said, if you didn't see it, a brilliant post by Python, which is just a great picture of Terry with his birth and death date. And they said 2 down, 4 to go.
Yeah. Well, the first time they all came out after Graham had passed, and they came out with his ashes, and I believe it was Eddie Izzard knocked it over.
Eddie was out there, and Terry Gilliam knocks it over. And the reason why I remember that, because Terry Gilliam has this rat tail. Mm-hmm. One of the ugliest things I've ever seen. So I can still see him sitting there with that gray, very American sweater, just sitting there, and he goes to uncross his legs and kicks it over. But the best part is they're sweeping it under the rug, and out comes Gilliam with a goddamn dustbuster.
Yeah.
The other thing was when Graham passed was, and rightfully so, because they wrote it together. The parrot sketch, him and John.
Mm-hmm.
John Cleese basically what's the word?
You googly.
You googly. You googly. Thanks, Preston and Steve. With basically quoting that sketch. Graham Chapman is no more. He's bereft of life. He's kicked the bucket.
Pushing up the daisies.
Pushing up the daisies. You wouldn't volt Voob if you put 25,000 volts through him. Yeah. But I do encourage those who can stomach a bit of old-fashioned, sometimes not politically correct humor to go back and watch a television show because it is brilliance. It's absolute brilliant. Not all of it's 100%. There's this very glorified, just like the old days of SNL where it's like everything was great. And I'm like, not really. Python had, listen, a lot of it, most of it's great. There's a few flat moments, probably more for Americans because there's probably references in there that you and I will never understand. Unless you look it up, and I don't feel like doing that much research.
But save that, just go right to Monty Python and the Holy Grail, or go right to Life of Brian.
Let me share one last story with you. And this is why I knew I was quite frankly, a man amongst boys. Every Friday in 11th grade, we'd bring a movie in to show the class. We'd start it one Friday and we'd finish it the next week.
Mm-hmm.
And I brought in the Holy Grail.
Awesome.
Nobody thought it was funny.
What?
Not one person. The only part most of the people laughed at was the Black Knight.
Jesus.
And that's when I knew, oh God, I need to get the hell out of this town.
I knew it was funny. I knew it was funny, and only because I watched it when it came on television, like uncut. And my mom thought it was funny. And this is the same mom who you could always tell the difference between men and women because men love the Three Stooges and women hated them. She always hated the fact that I watched the Three Stooges and everything like that. We're watching Monty Python and the Holy Grail. She walked in on this scene where, they're trying to cross the bridge and ask me these questions 3. And my mom died laughing. Because what's your name? Yeah, what is your quest? Seek the Grail. What's your favorite color? Blue. Oh, off you go then. This is easy. And then everyone, this is easy. And then when the next 2 guys got launched, she was dying laughing. So that's when I knew it was funny.
They also like beating up cats, which makes me laugh.
Yeah.
Like there's several scenes in that movie where there's a random person off screen just beating the hell out of a cat. Against the rug.
and they've empowered bunnies for the rest of mankind.
They have. I warned you, but did you listen to me? No, you didn't.
We get in it. We'll jump out of the rat. What? Out of the rabbit? Yes.
The rabbit's already inside.
You tit.
Castle Anthrax will always make me laugh.
Okay.
For the reason that, Michael Palin's finally, or who does Palin play? Lance, Lance, no, not Lancelot. Oh, damn it. I'm drawing blanks tonight.
It's okay.
Because Cleese is Lancelot. Anyway, he's there and he's about ready to finally let the women have sex with him. Like, in comes Lancelot, John Cleese, take him out. And right as they're off screen, oh, no, you hear, I bet you're gay. And then, no, I'm not. That and Kelly mentioned earlier one line I always forget, which is technically a throwaway. It's Palin and Jones. Back to Terry Jones. Jones is the kid in the castle, or the son. He's not really a kid, but one day, lad, all this will be yours. And he just goes, "What the curtains?" Just smacks him. Oh man, that sucks. It's funny because it's like when somebody dies, that's put out a body of work. Like when Bowie died, it's like I'm just going to listen to everything I have. Neil Peart died. We watched. We listened to all kinds of Rush for about a week, and it was like, well, I'm going to watch a bunch of Python. I'm like, I literally just watched it. So,
Mhm.
uh, and still, we're going to finish it this week. But thank you for indulging me about Mr. Terry Jones.
Always.
Let's not waste any time now. Next week, we're going to talk about all the happenings of the Royal Rumble. But before we get to that with Omega Squad Chris Green, let's talk a little bit about the past. And we've used the time machine to go back. And this is where I hand the reins over, not the Roman Reigns, over to you, Craig.
Thank you, Daniel. I will take those reins and use them thusly. Fans, listeners of HIAC Talk Radio, please walk back with me in time to a point where territories ruled the landscape of professional wrestling, where titles were called belts, and where sports entertainment was professional wrestling. This particular edition of Wrestling Historian is going to have a theme to it. I'll leave it up to you to decide which theme this is. We're going to go back to January 16th, 1970, in light of our most recent wrestling death. On this date, January 16th, 1970, the now late great Rocky Johnson won the America's Championship in Los Angeles. In the Los Angeles territory, the America's Championship was the top belt in that territory, a title that would be held by future Hall of Famers like Roddy Piper. Both Dory Funk and Terry Funk held this belt. Chavo Guerrero made his famous, earned the Great Ernie Ladd. But Rocky Johnson won the America's Championship on January 16th, 1970. And inside of a month, Rocky Johnson would hold every title in the territory. He would win the Beat the Champ, which was the TV championship, and he would hold the America's Tag Team title with another African-American superstar named Earl Maynard. So within a month, Rocky Johnson would have every title in this territory. I said in last week's Historian, when we were celebrating the life of Rocky Johnson, every territory he went in, he was the top man. And in Los Angeles in 1970, he won every title in that territory within a month. You needed a black babyface in a territory, it was Rocky Johnson. And January 16th was proof positive. That was back in 1970 when Rocky Johnson won the America's Championship. On that same date, January 16th, 2000, Dan, I'm sure you remember this, WCW sold out pay-per-view. On this particular pay-per-view, the main event, the world title, changed hands where Chris Benoit defeated Sid Vicious, making him tap out to the crippler crossface to win the WCW Heavyweight Championship. Arn Anderson was the special guest referee for this night. And Chris Benoit would win his first ever world championship. The next night, however, Chris Benoit would be stripped of the belt because Arn didn't see Sid Vicious's leg under the ropes when he tapped out. This is all a cover-up. The fact that Chris Benoit had left the company and would be appearing on the WWE 2 weeks later.
Yeah.
January 18th. It's a landmark date, very special date for several people, but on January 18th, 1894, the great Toots Mondt was born. And for you, this is a wrestling historian, so if you new fans don't know the name Toots Mondt, I'm going to tell you who he was and why he's so important in today's wrestling climate. Toots Mondt was a wrestler, John Raymond Mondt, and his nickname was Toots. And when he finished his wrestling career, or when he was still wrestling, not as successful as he was, he, the late great Edge Strangler Lewis, and Edge's manager Billy Sandow, in 1919 formed their own wrestling company, their own wrestling promotion, so they wouldn't be at the whims of other promoters. So they formed their own wrestling promoter, and promotion and got other great wrestlers at the time to join up with them. One chief among them, Jimmy Londas. And the three of them, Ed Strangler Lewis, Billy, his manager Billy Sandell, and Toots Mondt, within 6 months controlled the course of wrestling in North America. It was Toots Mondt that got wrestling, professional wrestling, out of the burlesque halls, out of the back alleys, and actually got it into the arenas. It was Toots Mondt who instituted time limits, because some wrestling matches would go on for 2 or 3 hours at a time. So Toots Mondt instituted time limits. He became friends with the owner of the New York Rangers and other local businessmen in New York. It was Toots Mondt who got wrestling in Madison Square Garden in 1939 to 1948.
That was the Gold Dust Trio, was it not?
They were called. Thank you, Dan. They were called. You're right.
Go ahead.
Yes, they named themselves the Gold Dust Trio because everything they touched turned to gold. So the name Gold Dust has been around for a while, folks. Just saying it. And they were based in the Northeast. And while there, it was Toots Mondt who started working with Jess McMahon, who is the father of Vince McMahon Sr. So Vince Jr. is a third-generation wrestling promoter. So it was Jess McMahon and that he first went into business with, and then later on was Vince Sr., Jess's son. And because they had such a stranglehold on wrestling in the Northeast, when Buddy Rogers was the NWA champion, Toots booked all of Buddy's matches in the Northeast. So even though Buddy was a National Wrestling Alliance champion, he would only primarily defend his belt in the Northeast. Philly, Boston, Washington, Madison Square Garden. Meanwhile, other promoters across the United States, Sam Mushnick in St. Louis, Paul Bosch in Houston, say, hey, we need the NWA champion. And Toots would say, no. It was because of this that they would break away from the NWA and would form their own company. They would rename the Capital Wrestling Corporation, which they wrestled under the NWA. They would rename the Capital Wrestling Corporation the Worldwide Wrestling Federation and would name Buddy Rogers as their first champion. Okay.
Were you going to explain how he got the championship, or were you going to skip that part?
Well, he won it, Dan, in a tournament in Rio de Janeiro.
I was going to say the original. That was the original fictitious, air quotes. It was totally real storyline created by Toots.
Yes.
That was the first time that was ever used, was that tournament in Rio de Janeiro, which you could just check that stuff now. But back in the day, you couldn't check that. Like, yeah, that happened.
Even as recently as 1979, you couldn't check that stuff because that was also the same city in the same arena in the same part of Rio de Janeiro that Pat Patterson became the first Intercontinental Champion by winning the tournament. Just the same tournament. I don't know if the same wrestlers were involved in Buddy Rogers' tournament. We still don't know who we beat in the finals or who entered the tournament, but just like Pat Patterson in 1979 and 1963, Buddy Rogers won a tournament in Rio de Janeiro to become the first Worldwide Wrestling Federation heavyweight champion. And it was also during this time in 1963, Vince McMahon, a local Italian strongman, was making his way through, and Vince McMahon saw this kid as just a mid-carder, maybe for 2 or 3 years in the mid-card. Toots Mondt looked at this Italian strongman and said, this is the future of our company. We need to build around him. That man, of course, would be Bruno Sammartino, and that man, Bruno Sammartino, would become the greatest champion in professional wrestling history, holding the Worldwide Wrestling Federation Championship that he won from Buddy Rogers in 48 seconds and holding that for 8 years.
2 more legends of wrestling also have the I can only think of 2 other big, huge names. Not that that's a slight on Toots' name. When I get to my point, you'll understand what I'm saying. Two more legends have him to thank for getting their careers off to a tremendous start and legendary status, and that would be one Stu Hart, and the other would be Bill Watts.
That's true. It would indeed, yeah. So Toots Mond's reach was far, and his influence was just unimaginable for what he did, not only for the careers of some of the greatest professional wrestlers of all time, the greatest professional wrestler in WWF history, but what he did for the business in creating, making it marketable, making it seen, bringing it to arenas, making it the number one attraction on the East Coast, and making stars, not just a Bruno Sammartino, but before that it was Antonino Rocca that Toots Mont pushed ahead because he saw the huge Latino population that came out to support Antonino Rocca. And just like I mentioned Sputnik Monroe last week, when you have a huge following among African American fans, they're the ones that are going to come and pay to see this man. So why not fill the arena? Why not make him your star? Antonino Rocca had a legion of Latino fans, both Italian, Spanish, and Argentinian, that would come to the arena just to see him. It helped the fact that he was the most acrobatic, high-flying wrestler that anyone had ever seen, but he also had a huge following. So, and Toots saw the same thing in Bruno Sammartino, the same thing that Vince McMahon Sr. did not see, because he only saw a mid-carder when he saw Bruno. He saw a 5'10" guy that was just strong. Toots saw the impact he had and the way the fans reacted to him, and all he saw was Italian fans paying money hand over fist to see this strong kid toss everyone around and lift guys over the head and beat them in under 5 minutes. He was the future of the company, Toots thought. Vince didn't see that. This is why Toots Mont is Toots Mont, and Vince McMahon Sr. McMahon Sr. was Vince McMahon Sr. Toots unfortunately fell on hard times and on the outs with most of the McMahon family, which explains why Toots Mont was only elected into the WWE Hall of Fame in the Legacy wing in a short 10-second soundbite in 2017. Okay, the man who helped find the company, start the company in 1963, wasn't inducted until 2017 because of the bad blood he had with the McMahons. But Toots Mont was born January 18th, 1894. Another big birthday from someone born on that same day, January 18th. Happy 66th birthday to the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase. I don't know if you were fortunate enough to see or have you seen it's available on Amazon, the documentary on Ted DiBiase. It's unbelievably good, if only for the footage the pre-WWF footage. And people that know Ted DiBiase, I'm sure, only know him as the $1 Million Man, and that's fine,
Sure.
because that's still one of the greatest heels in professional wrestling history.
Sure, but
before that, Ted DiBiase was the quintessential white meat babyface. Before that, Ted DiBiase was in demand across the country for people that wanted him to be the top face in the territories, and that he was in Georgia, in Texas, in the Mid-South. And his heel turn is still one of the biggest heel turns in my opinion in professional wrestling history. It would be like Rey Mysterio turning on John Cena. Absolutely no one saw it coming, and it was just shook the whole professional wrestling world by storm, and it started his career as a major league heel. But if you back to the Amazon special, it talked about his face, it talked about his life on the road, and again, footage I'd never seen, pictures I'd never seen. He talked about his relationship with his son, Ted, why he left the business when he did, and how what life was on the road and how it almost ruined his family. Because any professional wrestler would tell you, your life is on the road, and marriage isn't always the best thing. Which is why we have so many second and third generation professional wrestlers, because kids of wrestlers never saw their dad, so in order to feel closer to them, they became wrestlers too. just to be close to their dad. But it's called The Price of Fame, or Everyone's Got a Price, Ted DiBiase story documentary, and it's on Amazon. And he also talks about his father, Iron Mike DiBiase, whom I didn't know. Obviously, the legend Iron Mike DiBiase died in the ring, but the person who administered to him CPR at the time, or was passed for CPR, was Harley Race.
Oh God.
And the only reason why Iron Mike DiBiase was wrestling that night in the first place, because the guy who was supposed to wrestle that day took that night off. That man, Terry Funk.
Oh my God.
So yeah, lots of history with Ted DiBiase, who turned 66 today. Also turning 50. Not today. I'm sorry, January 18th. Also that same day, that same birthday, turning 51, January 18th, Dave Batista.
Dave, Mr. Batista.
Another birthday. And also January 18th, 1971, I mentioned earlier, the man who was born on this date, January 18th, Toots Mondt, was responsible for starting the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, and who saw this Italian strongman as the future of the company. That man would be Bruno Sammartino, who would hold the WWF World Heavyweight Championship for 8 years, a record that will never be broken. Well, January 18th, 1971 was when it came to an end. In Madison Square Garden on that date, Ivan Koloff, after a body slam and a knee to the chest off the top rope, Ivan Koloff pinned Bruno Sammartino in Madison Square Garden and won the Worldwide Wrestling Federation Heavyweight Championship. Bruno had never been pinned at the Garden. Bruno has never since been pinned at the Garden. Ivan Koloff, and he ain't gonna be, but Ivan Koloff is the one who did the deed, and he did it January 18th, 1971. Still, many consider the biggest upset in professional wrestling history. Madison Square Garden, to anyone who was there, said it was quiet as a church. No one believed what was happening. No one believed it did happen, but it did. January 18th, 1971, Ivan Koloff, who was still not in the WWE Hall of Fame, defeated Bruno Sammartino, the only time Bruno's ever been pinned in Madison Square Garden. That same day, did you want to add something?
No, go ahead. It's okay.
Saying on that day, January 18th, 1998, the Royal Rumble on the 98 Rumble, probably my favorite Rumble of all the Rumbles. This Royal Rumble was when Stone Cold won his second straight Royal Rumble in 1998. But it was also one of the many key features of that Rumble was the three faces of Foley. Cactus Jack entered the Rumble at number 1. Mankind entered at number 16, and Dude Love entered at number 28. The only time that one man has been in the same Rumble 3 times. And if that wasn't enough, and by God, don't you think it ought to be, the main event of that Royal Rumble was the WWF Heavyweight Champion Shawn Michaels defeating The Undertaker in a casket match. During that match, it was when Undertaker backdropped Shawn, and Shawn's back hit the side of The Undertaker's coffin, and that with that hit, Shawn Michaels would suffer 2 herniated discs, and one disc would be crushed completely. And that injury is the one that would take Shawn Michaels out of competition for 4 years.
It is so hard to watch because you could just hear the sound that makes.
Yeah.
And way his body, like no body lands like that.
No.
And it's crazy because, for years, I'm the commissioner and he'll never wrestle again. The fact that first of all, not only did he change, if he born again Christian, whatever, that I'm not here to judge religion in that way. If you find Jesus and that changes you into a decent human being, and you make up for your past transgressions, If that's the way you got to do it, that's the way you got to do it. But not only did it change him, but he wrestled how many years after that? After 4 years? Did he wrestle for another 11, 10? I
Yeah,
don't remember.
yeah,
Uh, and he was still one of the best.
yeah. That he was. Um, but it was that injury that would eventually cost him the title because that same Rumble, Dan, in the up in the skybox, congratulating Steve Austin on his win, was Iron Mike Tyson.
That's right. Yep.
That would set the stage for Steve Austin's very first championship. Steve Austin would win the Royal Rumble that night. Shawn Michaels would retain the World Heavyweight Championship, and Iron Mike Tyson would confront these guys the next day on Raw. But it happened all January 18th. And that same day, finally, January 18th, 2003, we said goodbye to maybe the greatest heel of all time, the legendary original Sheik.
Oh, yeah.
Edward Farr had passed away at the age of 76 after heart failure. We talked about Toots Mondt, responsible for starting a lot of great wrestlers in their career. The Sheik, also responsible for starting great legendary careers like Sabu, like Rob Van Dam, because they both grew up in the same area, but also Scott Steiner and Greg Valentine all owe their careers to the original Sheik. Like I said, one of the greatest heels of all time, maybe the greatest heel of all time when it comes to the amount of heat he got, the amount of he was a top man in Canada for 10 years straight. Also in Detroit, many-time United States champion. Also in Texas. I don't know if you saw the Stone Cold sessions with Stone Cold and the Undertaker. Yeah, young Mark Calloway talked about his going to his first wrestling match in Texas, and he and his buddies were going to go see the original Sheik, and they said, "Man, I'm gonna give it to him when he comes down the aisle because they got close seats." And when he said, "Man, Sheik came down the aisle. We took one look at him, and we were all asses and elbows flying, And then after the match, they were like, "Man, I thought you were gonna say something. Man, I thought you were gonna say something." But that was the aura of the Sheik, a guy that Mark Callis was taller than even back then, but the aura that the Sheik had was just a guy that you got out of his way. Ed Farhat was the real deal. Again, 10 years in Toronto, undefeated. Brought in person after person to try and defeat him, and face after face. Even Bruno came in to try it, and he couldn't beat the Sheik. The Sheik, again, responsible for more blood and mayhem and box office than any wrestler in the history of Detroit and in Canada. And that whole Detroit, Toronto area, the Sheik ran it. And as a booker and as the top heel. But like anybody, you put yourself on top for so long, fans get tired of it, and they did. But for 10 years, when you're the number one guy in one territory for 10 years, that's saying something. And the Sheik did it. But we lost him January 18th, 2003. January 19th, 1992, in Albany, New York, of all places, Ric Flair proved that he was indeed a 60-minute man. Because January 19th, 1992, Ric Flair, second man in the Royal Rumble, won the Royal Rumble by eliminating both Sid Justice, mind you, and Hulk Hogan to become the WWF Heavyweight Champion. And I still remember his backstage interview with Mr. Perfect Kurt Hennig and Bobby Heenan in tow. With a tear in my eye, I will say this is the greatest night of my life.
Hey, put that cigarette out.
Hey, put that cigarette out. Mean Gene with the shoot comment. Put that damn cigarette out.
I don't get that at all, but that makes me laugh every time.
I don't know who was smoking or why, but and I don't know, it wouldn't affect the broadcast, but Mean Gene wasn't having that. Yeah. But and Ric Flair will tell you, when he agreed to come into WWF in 1991, September of 1991, he wasn't promised the belt. He wasn't told he was going to win the belt. He wasn't told he was going to, not even that he was going and even though Hogan put him over, not he was even going to job to Hogan. He just came in and was Ric Flair. I just need you to be Ric Flair, and Ric Flair won his first first WWF Heavyweight Championship on the date January 19th, 1992, going 59 minutes and 26 seconds to win the Royal Rumble. That same date, January 19th, 2007. This is a bad month for saying goodbye. I don't know why it's always January. January 19th, 2007, we said goodbye to Scott Bam Bam Bigelow. Passed away at the age of only 45. Autopsy revealed later on there was massive amounts of cocaine and antidepressants in his system. But yeah, and we forget how quickly his star rose when Bam Bam started. When he was wrestling Andre the Giant and stealing the show at the Survivor Series, he was only 25.
Yeah.
And he'd already done so much. The most impressive graduate of Larry Sharp's Monster Factory, actually put the Monster Factory on the map. Larry Sharp was his original manager when Jerry Lawler wanted to use him in Memphis to get some seasoning. That was his first big break. And then his word spread of this huge guy that can do this unbelievable flying tactics, and with the tattooed head. Who had the tattoo on a bald head? In 1987, nobody did. And so when Bam Bam showed up in the WWF, he immediately took Hacksaw Duggan's spot in a feud with Andre the Giant, and he stole the Survivor Series, pinning both King Kong Bundy and the One Man Gang by himself before losing to Andre in the very first Survivor Series. But Bam Bam, and he would team up with Hogan against Andre the Giant and Ted DiBiase all across the country, sell out matches everywhere. He said the biggest thrill was selling at Madison Square Garden, and all of his buddies from Atlantic City came out to see him because they couldn't believe their buddy, the former bouncer and former bounty hunter that still had a bullet lodged in his back, was here in the WWF main eventing with Hulk Hogan. But after that, went to the ECW, was the ECW heavyweight champion and TV champion. I remember Scott Bam Bam Bigelow was the first man to main event WrestleMania, to wrestle in WrestleMania and Starrcade in the same year. No one had done that before Bam Bam Bigelow.
That's right.
Yeah, his time in WCW wasn't that long.
Never, ever forget. One of the last things that WCW exploded with, I mean, ratings, I don't know, but one of the best things I'd ever seen was that random December Nitro in 1998 when Bigelow just showed up in the building looking for Goldberg.
Yeah.
Being he was from Jersey and being that it was like, oh my God, Bam Bam's here, and I have by the way, I have a Royal Rumble comment from the Mr. Gator coming up here in a second.
Okay.
But the fact that it was Goldberg, it was like, oh, Jersey boy Bam Bam's here. He's going to kill him. And then he did nothing with it because WCW booking, and I hear the tweet from Harry now. I know WCW's dead's Harry. I know it. But I will never forget the sound of that building when Bam Bam just gets out of this red Cadillac, which is the same red Cadillac that J.J. Dillon got in to leave the building later. Got fired for letting Bam Bam get into the building in the first place. But just him going in, where's Goldberg? just beating the crap out of him. And listen, not for nothing, Bam Bam had some great matches in WCW the small time he was in there, and we got the Jersey Triad out of it. I'm not that upset.
No, and Bam Bam was part of.
Go ahead.
Bam Bam was part of two great groups, in the ECW with Chris Candido and Shane Douglas, and then like you said in WCW, the Jersey City Triad with DDP and Chris Canyon. So Bam Bam left his mark everywhere he went, um, but unfortunately could not run his demons, and we lost him January 19th, 2007, at the young age of 45.
Go back to the Rumble for a second. Mr. Gator says the one-man gang won the best Rumble ever. The best one, he said. The Practice Rumble in 1987. That was his contribution to that conversation.
Wow, and it wasn't the best one. And the first one was won by Hacksaw Duggan on the USA Network, and there was only 20 men in the Rumble, and One Man Gang was not one of them. So,
no, I think there was a Practice Rumble. He's referencing one that was probably I've heard this before.
Yeah, and I've also, and they did Royal Rumbles at house shows that year in 1987 around. So, because I remember there was one in Philly, or one in the Meadowlands, where the Killer Bees were going to be in it, and they renamed it the Royal Bumble. They were bees.
Jesus Christ.
But they,
wow.
there were Royal Rumbles and house shows across the WWF at the time. After Hacksaw Duggan had won the Royal Rumble on USA and it was a big ratings grab, they did the house show tour, and then the following year they had the first pay-per-view Royal Rumble.
Sounds like a Sean O'Brien pun. Well, I have the Mr. Gator on here. I'm going to call him the Mr. Gator because that's how he signed in, and I love it. They did the Practice Rumble in St. Louis in '87. I believe it. HIAC, you and I are proud to. I bet you didn't know this. Here, breaking news, dude. Are proud to. And Gator wanted to be clear. Of course, he's being facetious, and I knew he's being facetious too. It's Gator. You'll meet him one day. He's a good guy.
Good.
Until then, I'm going to hold him. Well, he is the. There are two entities that run Primetime Pro Wrestling. One is the Hellbender, Lolo, and the other is the Gator. Not the Gator with a heater. Not the heater with a Gator. Not the it's the Gator.
Gotcha.
I'm holding his chair hostage, which he's going to steal yesterday. But anyway, just to break in from the historian real quick, Primetime Pro Wrestling, sponsored by HIAC Talk Radio, and the Wrestling Historian segment, is sponsoring this match that was supposed to happen at the WrestleMania shows in Jersey last year. It will now be taking place in Tampa, Florida, for Primetime Pro Wrestling presenting Sean Ross Sapp Serve Tall at the Coppertail Brewery, 2601 East 2nd Avenue in Tampa on Thursday, April 2nd. It is a earlier show, bell time 4 p.m. You have plenty of time to enjoy other shows there. And the match that was announced, like, again, a match that a lot of people are going to want to see, and we're going to finally get it, Daniel Makabe versus Eric Royal. If you don't know the name Eric Royal, familiarize yourself with this man. If I could not tell you, this is a sponsored commercial placement in the Wrestling Historian segment. So we're sponsored, vice versa. You need to look this man up. Eric with a K and an A, Eric Royal. I am not underrating this man. I cannot put him over any more than this, Craig. He's one of the best wrestlers out there right now, and the fact that more people don't know his name is a goddamn insult. So please, whoever's listening to this, familiarize yourself with that man, and also familiarize with yourself. Easy for me to say, Craig. Please take this over in a second. Back over. Primetime Pro Wrestling. Familiarize yourself with that too. Now that our commercial read is over, Craig, steal the segment.
I will be more than happy to rescue this segment from you, Dan.
Rescue? It was a good promo.
It was a great promo. And I do know Eric is, I know the name. That's how good he is, because I don't follow any other wrestling organizations except the big two, but his name keeps popping up because of his talent, and that shines through more than anything else. So I'd be more than happy to promote him, because anyone that good needs to be seen by more people.
Absolutely.
And the last thing on this date, Dan, January 19th, especially for you, because I know you know where you were. on January 19th, 2015, watching Monday Night Raw, because on this particular Monday Night Raw, while John Cena was wrestling Seth Rollins, making his Raw debut in the first time in his 30-year career, costing Seth Rollins a victory, would be the man called Sting.
Good. I'm glad he cost Seth Rollins victory, because the hell with Seth Rollins, the big meanie head. Yes, Sting in the WWE. Well, I still don't know. It's kind of bittersweet for the Sting mark, because it was like, wow, he looked like. We've talked about it at great length before, so I'm not going to beat the dead horse again. It didn't end the way. Well, it certainly didn't end the way he wanted it to. It didn't end the way any of the marks wanted it to, the Sting marks. But he looked like he was having a good time with it. He looked like he was having fun with that whole thing. Even past WrestleMania, came back up to the Seth Rollins stuff. Mm-hmm. He looked like he was having a ball. Go ahead, Craig.
He was having a ball. Up until the first buckle bomb, I thought he was having a lot of fun.
It's the what's the series called that they did about that match? Not 24, but I forget the name of the series. But
365.
It's like, I don't remember the 30 for 30 WWE version. But very eye-opening that, they talked about it, and Sting was like, I landed wrong. I don't know what I did. Done it 100 times. Easy, tuck your chin. I didn't. And they did it again, and it screwed us up, and it screwed me up. And I was like, please, God, don't end it like this. And unfortunately, it did. I would love to know. The only thing I felt left out of that documentary was I would like to know. And Mr. Gator says, I just want Sting and Taker in the ring together. I don't need or want a match. I just want them in the ring together. Just them staring at each other. Where's my Geritol? But I just want to know if they were going to put the title on him.
Yeah.
Because at the time, it was me, Dean, and Chris, and Chris and I were saying the same thing. Give him the title and then have Sheamus come out and knock his head off, because he was Money in the Bank winner at the time. Yeah. Knock Sting's head off, take the belt, but I just need that picture of Stinger holding the damn WWE title, put a capper on the career, see you later, goodbye. And I wonder if we are anywhere 90%. I wonder what the percentage of how close we are to guessing that, because I would have thought that made perfect sense.
The only thing that would have made perfect sense to me, Dan, if you had Sting, after 30 years, finally wrestling his first match on the WWE in WrestleMania, have him win. What's that going to? Is that going to hurt anyone?
No, but as soon as they announced it was going to get against Triple H, again they were like, "Who do you think's going to win?" I'm like, "Triple H." Triple H isn't going to let Sting go over on him at WrestleMania. It's not going to happen. I'm not going to get what I want. We're going to get a bunch of old craps out there. And most of it doesn't make any sense that the NWO would be on his side. It's the stupidest goddamn cluster effery booking I've ever seen. It was WCW Nitro booking. I'll give you that. It was just like watching a Nitro where crap happened at the end. I'm like, what is going on here? But no, I knew he wasn't gonna go over, and I'm gonna get worked up about it again.
Okay, so we're gonna switch days. We're going to go to January 20th. I mentioned January 19th, 2007. We lost Bam Bam Bigelow. Well, the very next day, January 20th, right here in Philly, I attended, me and the PW posse, the PW, yes, the PW clique attended the Pro Wrestling Unplugged show, Cuffed and Caged, in Philly. And started that card started with a 10-bell salute to Bam Bam Bigelow. And the sad part was a lot of wrestling fans, the people that didn't know that he had passed. But also on that show, primetime Amy Lee defeated Mercedes Martinez for the PW Women's Championship. I say that because Mercedes Martinez just signed, damn it, with the with the WWE.
Not going well over there, Craig?
It's over with. We lost by 12.
Yep, that makes sense.
Al Horford at 7 points. He came out with 3 straight threes, and then that's it. We were outscored 31-23 in the fourth quarter.
Yeah. Brett Brown does not know how to close a game, and I can't defend the guy anymore. There is a problem. There's a fundamental problem with this team closing games. They did it the last game against Brooklyn. Brooklyn sucks. Brooklyn sucks, and they almost lost to them. And while I'm very happy that they won, that like certain games shouldn't be that close because I'm like, it's basketball.
The game before that, the Knicks suck. Why are we beating the Knicks by 3 points?
Exactly. There's a fundamental problem either with the coaching or the leadership on the team, and this is it, boys. This is it. You got to figure it out now. This is your year. There is no next year. This is it.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to Mercedes Martinez. Yes, on NXT.
Yeah, has just been signed to been signed to NXT. Long overdue, because again, 13 years ago, and Mercedes came to the front. She always comes down the front row to her music, and she would always dance with me before her match, and she was with the belt. But that was, and also this was a culmination of the feud between PW, Pro Wrestling Unplugged, and JCW, Juggalo Championship Wrestling.
That's right.
So they got to see the Insane Clown Posse up close and personal. Violent J and Shaggy 2 Dope were in Philly, and they gave me the finger and the PW click. Along my friend the Muzz, he was 6'4", got in his face. And at the end, you got to meet Muzz. You met him at the Royal Rumble party 2 years ago.
I remember Muzz.
Yeah. But at the end, Raven DDT'd everyone and said he was the best wrestler in the company and left. So that's how that night ended. But it was the beginning of it was a tribute to Bam Bam Bigelow. Also on that day, 2014, January 20th, 2014, we talked about finals and debuts. Well, on that particular episode of Monday Night Raw, January 20th, 2014, CM Punk would defeat Billy Gunn, and because of that, he was put in as number 1 at that weekend's Royal Rumble. But when CM Punk defeated Billy Gunn, that was CM Punk's final match on Raw and his final one-on-one match in WWE history.
Wow. Craig, real quick about the Sixers. Did we lose Jay Rich as well?
Jay Rich went out in the first quarter with the hamstring pull.
Jesus.
He did not return.
I don't want to talk about it anymore. Go ahead.
Me neither. January 21st, 1984. I know exactly where I was because I was at the Philadelphia Spectrum for a loaded card because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. At the Spectrum that night, the WWF Heavyweight Champion, the Iron Sheik, went to a double disqualification against Tito Santana. And the main event was Andre the Giant, Superfly Jimmy Snuka, and the WWF Tag Team Champions, Tony Atlas and Rocky Johnson, going up against Sergeant Slaughter and all 3 Samoans, Afa, Sika, and Samu, in a 2 out of 3 8-man tag team match. Now, this was not only was this the first time I saw Iron Sheik with the WWF Championship. Also on that card, Bob Backlund would lose to the Masked Superstar in a count out. Masked Superstar making his Philadelphia debut, but his WWF debut. And the Andre and Jimmy and the Soul Patrol would win their match. Alpha beat Rocky Johnson in the first fall. The second fall, which should have been the last fall, Superfly hit the Superfly splash off of Andre's shoulders against Sika, a move they'd done in Madison Square Garden to great success. But on the third fall, Andre hit the big boot on Alpha and sat on him for the win. But Superfly coming off Andre's shoulders, I always thought should have been the last fall. But that particular card would be not only the last time that Tony Atlas and Rocky Johnson would be defending their championship in Philadelphia, that would be the last ever title defense of the Iron Sheik, because this was January 21st, 1984, and we know what happened 2 days later. But that would be Iron Sheik's first, last, and only appearance in Philadelphia as the WWF champion.
I just want to say that you mentioned Tito Santana's name. Mr. Gator has the fortunate pleasure to get his ass kicked by Tito Santana very recently in recent history. So,
wow!
Cheers to you.
Cheers to you, Mr. Gator. Took one hell of an ass beating. That day, January 21st, 1984, I was at the Spectrum. 1985, 1 year later, I was in Florida going to college when I heard the news that Eddie Graham had committed suicide and died. Eddie Graham, one of the great minds in professional wrestling. We talked about Toots Mondt earlier and the Sheik and how they started so many great careers. Eddie Graham's wrestling mind was second to none, in that so many finishes that we still use were inspired by Eddie Graham. Eddie Graham was the only promoter that both the WWF and the NWA were. He was on good terms with both of them. In fact, Vince McMahon would call Eddie Graham and ask him for finishes. He didn't when he got stuck, often on the night of a card. And the same thing with the NWA. Eddie Graham would be NWA president at one point in his career, but because of his mind and the way he can book and the way he could promote and the way his eye, he could see the talent in so many great superstars. Because of that, he started the booking mind, the promoters that he influenced: Dusty Rhodes, Bill Watts, Ernie Ladd, Paul Heyman. And they all got their from Eddie Graham. They got so much, and because he had such an eye for talent, it was Vince McMahon who traded with Eddie Graham. Eddie would send his wrestlers from Florida up to the WWF to get some seasoning, or because he needed some room, so he would send Dusty Rhodes out to Florida because nobody else could get over. So as long as Dusty was there, so Dusty would come up to the WWF, sell out Madison Square Garden with superstar Billy Graham, and while Dusty was gone, they could put other guys over, like Steve Keirn, like Bob Backlund, like Kevin Sullivan, who would eventually make their way up to the WWF from time to time. And it was Vince McMahon who looked at the Kid Backlund and said, I need an all-American boy champion. The ethnic champions, they cause too many riots. Pedro Morales, Bruno Sammartino, I need an all-American boy. And he wanted Bob Backlund. Eddie Graham said, why not Steve Keirn? You want an all-American boy. Steve Keirn's dad was a Vietnam War veteran, POW, twice. And he's a much better talker than Backlund. And
yeah.
Vince said, nope, I want that Backlund kid. I bet you I can make money. And they made a bet, and Vince won. Bob Backlund, like I said, would be champion for 5 years and 10 months. But I still believe Steve Keirn, even though he became one half of the most influential tag team of his generation, the Fabulous Ones, I still think Steve Keirn as WWF champion would have had a lot better run than Backlund did.
Wow.
But we said goodbye to him on that same day. Barry Windham and Mike Rotundo, two Eddie Graham disciples. Barry Windham, the son of Blackjack Mulligan, the great uncle of current WWE champion Bray Wyatt. Well, on that day, 1985, Barry Windham and Mike Rotundo would win the WWF Tag Team Championship from Adrian Adonis and Dick Murdoch. On that same day, this is how big the WWF was. That show was sold out in Hartford, Connecticut. But at Madison Square Garden, Roddy Piper and Bob Orton went up against Junkyard Dog and Jimmy Snuka in a Texas Tornado match. So all that took place January 21st, 1985.
Wow.
Yep. And which brings us today. On this date in professional wrestling history, Daniel, the 1994 Royal Rumble had the worst ending of any Royal Rumble I ever saw. When Bret Hart and Lex Luger both went over the top rope at the same time.
You were very matter-of-factly about that. It's the worst one I've ever seen.
Yeah. And they would tie the first time Royal Rumble ended in a tie, and they would both wrestle other people for WrestleMania 10, and Bret Hart would end up regaining the WWO champion. That same Royal Rumble, Yokozuna would defeat Undertaker in another casket match, and this was the casket match that Undertaker lost, but it was buried thanks to the help of 12 guys. I think the head shrinkers, Diesel, Ludwig Borga, Bam Bam, I think, or I think the chauffeur, Jimmy Hoffa, and everybody else were there, and they set the casket on fire, and then Undertaker ascended. The person who was playing the Undertaker actually was Marty Jannetty, who would ascend, and Undertaker came on the monitor and said he will not rest in peace, and we wouldn't see the Undertaker again until that SummerSlam when the fake Undertaker, primetime Brian Lee, assumed the mantle, but yeah, that was the ending of the worst Royal Rumble ending I'd ever seen at that time. Up until the following year, that same day, on this same day, 1 year later, 1995, Shawn Michaels and Davey Boy Smith would have the second worst ending to any Rumble I've ever seen. But big kudos to those, to Shawn Michaels and Davey Boy Smith, because that was the first time that the two men that started the Rumble ended the Rumble. And so big credit to those guys. But when Shawn Michaels thrown over the top rope, it was because his feet touched that they made the rule that both feet had to touch the ground, because Shawn's one foot touched. So he wasn't eliminated, even though it was a botched finish. He came back in, skinned the cat, and threw out Davey Boy to win the Royal Rumble, and thus the rule was created that both feet had to touch the floor after someone is thrown over the top rope. And Shawn Michaels would win the Royal Rumble and would celebrate in the ring with Pam Anderson, who just got married for the 5th time. So that's a callback to from real life news.
We called back to another radio show. That's amazing. Wow.
And that, my friends, is what's called a wrestling historian.
Thank you very much for a great wrestling historian with a commercial in between. It was amazing. Improvised timing on the commercial, but it worked out great, I think. And I still think it's my favorite segment, especially when wrestling's a little slow during the week. That wrestling historian segment. I meant that very literally. I didn't mean slow. I meant, slow. Not move. Rumble's happening this weekend. I'm just like, I'll still watch the Rumble because I love the Royal Rumble, but it's like,
Yeah, I'm more excited over NXT TakeOver UK versus NXT than the Rumble. I think we'll see better matches there. And I've given up on trying to guess who's going to win the Rumble. I mean, we used to have bets. I talked about, back when the Muzz and my other members of the PW clique, we'd actually take bets on who would win the Rumble. But I've since realized that's a folly to actually guess who would win the Rumble this year or any year. So I'm just going to be interested to see who comes out, or usually it's the final 4 are the ones, because it used to be whoever's the MVP who would last the longest would get the biggest push.
Right.
But now it's like the final 4. Those are the ones that I'll focus on, because they're more than likely the people that are going to get the biggest push or a shot at the belt. Doesn't always work out. I mean, we remember the year that wasn't that long ago that Shinsuke Nakamura won the Royal Rumble, and nothing happened. But
Asuka won the
women's Rumble.
It kind of happened, but then it didn't happen. Like, it really didn't happen. Like, it was like, and then nothing.
Hmm.
I am looking forward to. I think this is a make good. I love Becky Lynch. I have nothing against Becky Lynch. I love her run. I love her as champion. I love the last year and a half of her run. Been fantastic. But I better get a make do on Asuka, and I like what they're going with this. I love her promos that are only in English for the last sentence. Her just going straight up off on people.
Yeah.
I love the Kabuki Warriors. I love everything about that. It's honestly been my favorite thing running up to this Rumble. I'm gonna be honest. I don't give a damn about the Monday Night Messiah. I don't care.
Yeah.
Uh, I liked seeing the Big Show come back. Uh, I was real tired of seeing everybody thinking they're funny, thinking that they were the first one to think of that he's going to turn heel before the end of this match pun 50 times in a row every minute on my Twitter feed to the point where we're like, all right, I'm turning that off. But I don't care about Lana. I don't care about Bobby Lashley. I'm not here to crap on the product or anybody's product. I have yet to watch AEW this week. Just aired. Um, Last week, AEW was the better show, other than NXT. NXT is great. I haven't been disappointed with NXT not one time. Plus, I know people in there.
But my only gripe is Buddy Murphy loses 3 matches in a row and gets a belt. Aleister Black wins 3 matches in a row and gets a 10-second squash.
I don't get it. I don't get what they're doing, and we'll talk about it more next week when Chris comes on. In fact, I think we'll do just that and skip Historia next week, and then the week after, just make it a 2-week episode only of only the Historian. Just to plan ahead while we're on the air.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I think we do need to talk about wrestling because it's been a couple months since we've talked about with Chris about all these shows starting, and it's like I understand the WWE is not going to change anything until the money goes away, and it's not, so nothing's going to change. Am I the only one that sees that Raw and SmackDown suck right now? Like, it's gotten worse. Like, I guess my tolerance is higher than others because I've sat through so many bad wrestling shows and good wrestling shows that I'm like, well, this is not as bad as people are saying. It's been bad it's been bad the last couple months. You're running up to Rumble. You're trying to sell a bigger arena. And that's what you got for me? I love wrestling. Like, I still watch it. Watch AEW, watch NXT. I try to watch as much live so I can get some eyes on the Twitter account. But I'm tweeting less and less every week. It's just like, I don't know. I don't see enough desperation in the WWE. I really don't. And there is going to become a point once AEW figures out their buzz, because they're still brand new. It was only in October, folks. It's only January. They're going to figure it out eventually, unless it completely breaks down, which I don't see that happening.
Yeah.
Where the WWE is going to have to wake up. Or NXT is going to have to be the primetime show.
I'm down with that.
I was going to say, which I'm fine with.
Yeah.
Like I said, I know people that are on that show. I know a few people that have, Eddie O and Jesse Carr, who are now on SmackDown and Raw. But there's a bunch of wrestlers on NXT, I know. Stephon Smith, who's reffed for Primetime Pro, just reffed 2 matches on NXT tonight alone. He's an NXT referee now. Shout out to Stephon Smith. He's a good guy. I'm glad he's being successful. It's just, it's going to come to a point where I'm going to watch Wednesday nights only. I'm not watching. I couldn't tell you how much I didn't care about SmackDown. I cared a little bit about Raw because Asuka and Becky, but am I out of line saying any of this, Craig? Am I off the boat?
No. I wish Raw was on SmackDown, and they're the lesser of the 2 sucks. Only because Raw is a better show than SmackDown. Maybe because they have more wrestlers that I want to see, like the Drew McIntyres and the Asukas. And SmackDown really doesn't have anything that I want to see, or any angles that I care about, or any wrestlers that I care about, outside of Bayley keeping the heel thing. But even that doesn't grab me as much as Lacey Underall's does, and or her being a face out of nowhere. No, nothing. I don't care about anything on Raw. Give me Kane coming back didn't do anything for me. So, um, yeah, it's just NXT or bust, and it's just the NXT pay-per-view anyway that's holding any type of interest for me.
NXT, NWA, and AEW are the best shows.
Yeah.
Plus, Tony Schiavone saying "What the F" on camera tonight.
Nice.
I watch Wednesday nights only at this point and read Twitter and see clips.
Okay.
I'm almost there, Gator. That was from Gator. I'm almost there, buddy.
Thank you, Gator.
SmackDown was completely YouTube clips last week because I was like, I'd rather do something else. Mm-hmm. And I hate, and let me be clear, not speaking about one or other podcast out there. I don't want to crap on the product. I have no interest in going, wrestling sucks, I hate it all. I want to tell you what I do better, sitting here from my chair in my house. I've never, no interest in doing that. But we're going to be real about it, and I can't defend the TV the last couple of weeks. That's just big. We're going to end on such a high note. Craig, where can people follow you? And when are you going to perform your next show? Not on Valentine's Day because the one guy didn't want you to.
Well, that's his problem. You can follow me on Craig Lagans on Facebook, Instagram, and on Twitter at CraigLiggeons. You can follow my other podcast, The Comic Book Gurus, on WMMR.com. The only show I'm doing, the comedy show that I'm doing that I alluded to on social media, is on February 14th, Friday night, 8 o'clock. That's the comedy show that I am doing. I wanted to get a gauge on if people would be interested in seeing me because the algorithms on Facebook don't allow me to promote my show properly on my post. Yeah. So I asked a random question, hey, if I do a comedy show, would anyone want to see it? Got an overwhelming response of yes, tell me 1,000 times yes, I'll come, I'll fly up, I'll tweet it, I'll send carrier pigeons, whatever. Then when it's actually on Friday, February 14th, 8 o'clock at the Rotunda, 40th and Walnut. I'll be talking about my love of television, my life as a TV addict, and how TV has shaped my life from puberty to adultery, called My Life in 19 Inches. Me on stage doing comedy. What you wanted to see, Facebook folks, is what I'm giving to you. Just so happens the day I'm doing it is Friday, February 14th.
I couldn't tell you how much I was laughing, and it brings me to the other one of my favorite comedians and voiceover artist, Josh Robert Thompson. He used to do live streams on Periscope, and Periscope is a trash app. Trash app with trashy people who don't deserve to live and breathe, most of them. But it would make me laugh, and he'd laugh at the same thing where he'd say, I'm thinking about doing a comedy show, and people would seriously comment about it. Well, don't do it on this date. I can't be there. Don't do it on this day. No, that's not how this works at all. No. I'll put the date out, and if you can come, you come. If not, shut up. That's why I was laughing so hard. And I went light on him, and I don't think he ever read my comment, but I did. I had to post something because it made me laugh so much. It's not about you, douchebags. Speaking of douchebags, follow me on Twitter at DanLaw83. The HIAC Talk Radio Network is on all social media platforms at HIAC Talk Radio, part of the VOC Nation Radio Network. Go to Apple Podcaster, Google Podcasts, and type in VOC Nation Radio Network for the podcast feeds, or go to thebradyhicks.com and look at HIAC Talk Radio for all of our episodes. For Craig Lagans, for the listener, Mr. Gator, who is also a boss, I'm the above average comedian, Dan Calachico. We will see you next week. Have a good one.